I'm going to ask. Thanks, Claire. So this is just for us to make it easier to capture some of the feedback. So if you don't mind us just recording the final moments of this call. So we had 3 groups, and in no particular order. You're more than welcome, whoever's ready from each of those groups, just to step up and take the mic, so that we can get a round of feedback. We don't need a word-by-word report, just a sense of some of the themes and key ideas that emerged from the conversation. And then that will also allow a few minutes for us to continue holding that conversation in this plenary space. Okay. Okay, who was in Kathy Dubois' group? Kathy, who in your group is going to feedback?
Yeah, so Anne Magro, I'm just looking at, okay. So we talked about this notion of the inequality gap that just gets larger and larger and larger, and is something that we address here and there in courses in a college of business, but it's not something that's integrated into our coursework at all. We also talked about what is our role in universities? What can we do? And we can broker honest conversations. That was a phrase that was that Anne tossed out. And we can also convene, like what they're doing. And we're going to learn more about this in October at George Mason, with bringing together Kaiser Permanente and their project that they're doing in the community. And then Anne's going to insert their business incubator into that. It's really dealing with all of the angles, the systemic issues that are related to health. And those are education and housing and all of those things. You can't just put Band-Aids on it. You've got to treat the system. And so what we can do is bring expertise. We can convene. We can be parts of conversations. Anders talked about the citizen conversations that he's been involved in Sweden. So much of this is we can make sure voices are heard. So that's kind of, I don't know. Anyone else from the group want to add more?
No, I think just one of the really important points that Anders makes is that we can't necessarily be the ones who are out there doing the doing. We need to be present. We need to be part of the conversation. We can be helping to bring the people together to have the conversations. But we can't be everywhere doing everything. It has to be the people who are directly affected.
And I love that about GRLI, because John, you've also always talked about the importance of bringing corporate partners and those voices to the group. So that is very much valued.
Unfortunately, Hassan had to drop off for the last 30 minutes of this call. We knew in advance, but I think that's increasing the ideas to see, can we, whether it's in these pods or in initiatives like the cohort or at our AGM, can we bring a +1 or a +2 or a +3 that helps, that helps build out that perspective. Maybe just for my own clarity, and if anyone else has any kind of just clarifying questions, you were mentioning that Anders is involved in citizen conversations. Maybe just out of curiosity, are those the citizen assemblies that okay, great. So Anders Sandhoff says, thank you, Sophie, for joining us. Wonderful that you were here today, and we'll see you soon. Okay, Anders Sandhoff has just written to me personally. Sorry, Anders, I think you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, good. A new type of arena parallel to the ordinary political arena that pushes politicians in a more radical direction. Yeah, and I've also spoken to some of the people in Oxford who I know has been running the citizens' assemblies there, which seems to offer a refreshing alternative to how policy gets shaped and implemented. So that's something that we should maybe also look at in more detail. Okay, unless there's someone else from that group, the second group, if we could maybe just hear from you.
I don't know whether I'm the second group or not, but just going back to what you were saying about
Harun and that he had to leave. I mean, his main message was that within corporate, it's all about access and affordability, which is kind of, pretty close to inequality as well. And that's sort of surrounded by the overall sort of themes of climate and diversity. So I think that's what I noted that he said.
Can I add something from group 2? Then that before it started out pretty informal and more or less by chance. But I put a question to Harun being a representative, coming from the corporate side now, or being in the corporate side is just getting into it. What about what his expectations would be? And he responded with sharing and amplifying data and key insights that we sit on. And I think he thought about, he addressed the academic community and he addressed community, GRLI as a whole, as something that he would really appreciate and get value out of. And of course, ultimately, sharing and amplifying insights and communicating that is ultimately for creating action. But I agree totally that convening is what is needed, and we can do that, and that's what we do, and that's how we work and function ourselves. And out of that, Letitia said something about don't be paralyzed by the complexity, and I think Marie said that herself, because I'm pretty much sometimes lost in the complexity of it, but don't be paralyzed by it. And that more voices being heard, which is about convening as well, is key. That's what I heard. Also, a last thing that is maybe a question for us. How do you shape and what is it what would be the radical university or the radical business school that is needed? We talked about students doing their thing, and we have examples from Jeff, from others, but sometimes, as Marie say, we have institutions and organizations that functions in a way which may not be fully appropriate for getting things done and taking advantage of the will and the engagement of the members of that organization or that community. So how do you shape that? How do you shape the radical, action-oriented university business school, which can can have an enhanced impact and make a difference? I don't know if anyone else, Letitia, Marie, and Jeff would like to. Was that totally out of the ballpark, or something to add? Jeff?
The only thing I would add is what Letitia, if I can quote you, Letitia, at the end of your sharing, is pointing out whose voices are we hearing and how do we constantly expand and invite that, especially recognition of the Global South and the voices of the experience informing what we're understanding and amplifying.
Thanks, Jeff.
Is that fair? Yeah.
Sorry, Letitia, did you want to add anything? Okay, thank you very much. Also,
no, it's the same thing I always keep saying is, yeah. I mean, I look at the faces and where's all my African friends and colleagues and South American and, everyone else. And so I don't think we need to change our perspective. We just need to do. We've always said we wanted to get more voices in the room, and we want to get different voices in the room. And then like Indigenous knowledge and all of these things where we hear from others as well. But
Thank
yeah,
you.
same old thing.
Thanks. And thank you also again, Anne, to you and Lisa for inviting Harun to form part of the conversation. So final group, and then I'm sure there will be a few more thoughts emerging. Who's giving feedback? From
I don't mind. There were, it's a pity Sophie had to leave because she had some good things to say. So we started talking about where we might have influence, and we talked briefly about accreditation, then we moved to deeper and other thoughts that were not unrelated to what people have said already. That we're at a kind of an interesting place in the pandemic process where we're all been through several stages of grief around it. We're feeling slightly battered or shook, as you'd say in Ireland, and there's a comfort in picking up the old habits. And if we're not careful, we will pick up the old things that are put into our hands by the neoliberal capitalistic machine, and we will carry on doing things as we did before. And in order not to do that, we need to find a way to listen to each other and to tell our irregular, awkward, uncomfortable stories and to hear each other. So it goes back to the thing of convening and of listening, and not rushing to listen with an action, but listening to kind of see what is it that people actually want. What are those soft, nebulous things we've learned from the various lockdowns we've been through, things when all as they are, and what things how can we process that and do some better things? And obviously, Sophie in her role as White Plus is very significant there, but the GRLI, she used the phrase holding space for that kind of a listening thing, and that's something that GRLI do very well. So that would have, I think, huge impact, not at all measurable impact, but nonetheless very real impact. What did I miss, lads?
I would just add, Sheila, to what you said. Maybe something that was discussed at some point, which is that somehow that the impact of GRLI is easier in academia, because many of us are from academia, compared to companies, where then it becomes maybe more difficult, but that's related to what has been said. And that, of course, we can influence present or future managers through education and present managers through executive education, of course. But the influence inside companies, that may be more difficult. But that would, I didn't have time to discuss that, but that would bring me, John, to the discussion we had in the Guardians meeting last week.
Thanks, Anna and Sheila for that feedback, unless there was anyone else. So maybe from what we've heard now from the other groups, just in terms of the themes around convening, around bringing expertise, and everything else that's been mentioned. Any reflections from what you've heard if you were in a different group? I have one or two things that I would like to respond to as well, or maybe just share some thoughts on, but I would like to give someone else a chance if they have a sharing. Yes, John.
Yes, I'd just like a sort of overall reflection. I heard the word from you first of all, but also mentioned by others about the word radical. And I was connecting the me, we, and all of us to sort of using slightly different words of developing the individual, the organization, and society. And I think that the main barrier is in the organization. I think there are a lot of individuals everywhere who want to do things and make things happen. And I think that the difficulty is getting the organizations to do that. And I think that's where we need to, not only do we need radical organizations, but I think we need to be radical, maybe together, to affect the organizations that we belong to, first of all. I mean, I know Maria was mentioning, something about the relationship of her faculty and so on and so forth. So, and I'm sure that goes on at least in my experience, pretty much every organization there's a barrier somewhere. And, you know, that's where I feel we need to free up.
Thanks, John. Any other ideas, thoughts?
I just briefly would
yeah,
like
Mina?
to comment.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry about that.
This is very good thinking. That we would need to find this barrier in the organization. I really like this kind of thinking, because I totally agree. At the individual level, I think there is so many people, and we kind of like feel that we are pressured to give up on our good intentions when we enter a certain kind of organizations. So there must be a barrier somewhere, and I think it's like a very good idea to focus on that.
Thanks. So there's a +1 for your idea, John. And I think Anders, you were about to add something. Anders Aspling, or was it Anders? Sorry.
Yeah,
it was one of Anders.
Yeah, there are too many of us. 2 is too many. No, it's good. I don't know if there. Yeah, I may pass on it, but it just struck me that we are. I mean, the urgency that we experience all immediately takes us into some sort of action mode mentally, intellectually. But at the same time, I mean, the impact in convening and listening and just sort of taking that in, you know, and not running for action immediately, but taking it step by step until you're grounded in where you are and where you want to go, and what you can do yourself to contribute to whatever you want to call it, a better world. I think that's something to reflect, to be more. And that's the way GRLI has operated over the years. And I think that's key value in just listening, convening and listening in itself, and do that in a relational mode, which we've been lucky to have within GRLI, actually. And the action will come out of that. That's my point right now. That don't be too concerned about the fact that we don't exactly find the button to put, or exactly where to put down our feet moving forward. It's fine to be still for a while, reflect, listen, reflect, learn, and then be ready to go.
Great, thanks. And I want to acknowledge, and if you're welcome to add something to that if you wish, Anders Sandhoff, but I love the radical inclusion principle of Burning Man. I don't know if you wanted to add anything about that, maybe ideas about how we can do that in the context of GRLI.
It strikes me, I mean, they use this stranger notion, and thinking of the boundaries of the cooperation and who's inside and who's out on the outside, and maybe we can do a second run of that.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good. Maybe just 2 short notes from my side on this. Obviously, in the previous partner pod rounds, we said bring a +1. It can be someone from a civil society organization, from a youth movement, from a business, and quite a few people took up the notes. I think we're going to keep that principle in place for future pod meetings, unless it's a pod meeting that's completely irrelevant to people that don't form part of the GRLI. But I think what I'm hearing here is, you know, that this idea of, you know, if Letitia, if you have a colleague in Latin America or a contact that you think would be someone whose voice needs to be heard in the context of the GRLI's work, by all means, when we have our next pod, bring that person, ask them whether they can attend or participate. So I think that's the one thing. The other thought I had was the following. We've now reached that interesting point where we have 25 full institutional partners, but I also know that one of our long-standing partners is most likely going to be stepping away next year to become an associate partner. And this is following an email conversation I had with them, where we said, why don't, you know, instead of, you know, you've now been a partner for 7 or 8 years, instead of stepping away from the GRLI, remain aligned as an associate partner, allowing a an institution or a learning organization from the Global South to become a full partner by contributing only 50% of the full partnership fee. I mean, we operate on a shoestring, so let's find a model whereby we can potentially, over time, increase the diversity at full partnership level by full partners inviting organizations from the Global South to become full partners and kind of subsidizing their full partnership fees. Obviously, details need to be worked out, and we'll have to discuss this in a lot more detail. But this was it's kind of an emergent thought from a conversation that I had with Griffith University, which of course you all know that they've been a leader in this field, and that they feel they want to make space for someone. And so we thought maybe that could be one way of doing it. So I just wanted to flag that as something that we're thinking. I don't know if it qualifies as radical, but it is certainly a different kind of model. So we're coming up to the half hour. I am going to be sticking around for a few more minutes after this call. But we have a few more minutes, just if there are any kind of final thoughts or reflections, including any feedback you may have on the format of the pods or future pods. We've got one advertisement, Claire Summer. We've got something coming up in October because there won't be pods in October. Can you just quickly share?
Yeah, absolutely, everyone. So I'd like to ask you all to please save the date on October 14th at 9 a.m. for those of us in the eastern side of the United States. Sorry, Jeff. And 3 p.m. for our friends who are on Antwerp time. And we're going to be speaking with Lars Maradis, who is at the University of Antwerp. And we're going to be discussing and sharing a piece that he co-wrote called Tapping into the Hidden Potential of the SDGs. And we'll be sending more information about it very soon in the newsletter and on social media.
There's also a blog article that we've tweeted and shared that Lars and Frans Madison wrote for us about 2 months ago or so. So
and we'll share that as well.
So it's not a pod gathering, it's more of what we call a courageous conversation on that particular topic. Okay. So it's wonderful seeing all of you. It's wonderful seeing some of the faces that I haven't seen in ages, like Soli and others. It's good to have you here.
Yes.
If there's anything else, I'm sticking around for a few minutes. Happy to hear if you have any thoughts or feedback. Glad to get that. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Soli.
Thanks,
So good to
everyone.
see you.
Bye.
It was lovely.
Bye.
See you.
As
Bye.
always.
Good to see you all.
Cheers.
Good to see you.
Love these conversations. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy.
Armand, so glad that you joined.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
I was in a what meeting was I in a teaching and learning meeting. And
Okay.
somehow today seems to be my day of inequality and transformation. I sat in an ethics meeting this morning and had to deliver some commentary on ethics applications. Then in this teaching and learning, we started talking about transformation. And so I championed that in the business school. And just as I want to step out, the topic comes up and I was like, come get done. I actually enjoy these conversations because in some ways it is like a valve release. I don't feel like this crazy person sitting in academia fighting this issue. And I hear the challenges in a different way. And then when you when you bring up that picture that you were about the golf, I do a session around that inequality, and I use there's a picture, what's this guy's name, that was on the Time magazine where you see.
Oh yes, of the township next to the suburb.
Yeah, and I talk about all of those ERS issues, just looking at that picture where water is a recreational utility. It's utilized for recreation just on the one side of the line, And
for 5% of the year.
yeah, and then on the other side, it's a means of survival. So we talk about these ERS issues and we talk about them, but the pickle might look the same for everyone, but it tastes differently and it's swallowed. And, and swallowing it is different.
Yeah, we're in the same storm, but some of us are in a lifeboat, some of us are swimming, and some of us are sitting in a super yacht.
Yeah. So that's crazy.
Well, thanks for that. I'm glad you found value in joining after all, and you're always very welcome. And please do also think of contacts and connections beyond Stellenbosch Business School if you want to bring someone into these conversations.
And thanks for what you copied to us as well on.
Yeah.
It's nice to meet you, Armand. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah.
I'll bring someone radical next time because you mentioned the word radical. Let me bring someone else that's radical.
Okay, wonderful.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Armand.
Take care, go well.
Bye.
Take care.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.